To turn the page, the 49ers official scouting report for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. This is the initial look that I do every single week, so go ahead and subscribe. And also check out The Athletic, where I post a printed version of this scouting report, usually on Tuesday of every week. It's reset day, it's laundry day. The 49ers have improved to 6-3, and they're about to play the 4-5 Tampa Bay Buccaneers, whose quarterback Baker Mayfield is pictured on the scouting report. This is my summary for Tampa Bay. These guys are decidedly mediocre. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. This is a mediocre opponent. They're ranked around number 19 or number 20 in DVOA. It doesn't really matter. The 49ers are a lot better than them. They're 11-point favorites. But I will say that Tampa Bay is equipped to keep games close. First off, they have the top red zone defense in the NFL. So even though they've been giving up a lot of yardage, even though the overall DVOA on defense hasn't been great, they have stiffened up in the red zone and allowed only 32% of possessions from opposing offenses to turn into touchdowns. Two, Tampa Bay has a good turnover ratio. Their 16 takeaways are near the top of the league, and they have a good run defense, which is ranked number 7 DVOA. A lot of the same players who have led Tampa Bay to top finishes in run defense in recent seasons. I talk about the turnover differential. That means the offense has to carry its end of the load. They can't be giving up the football all the time. And Tampa Bay has the second lowest turnover rate in football, which is also a good thing. So Baker Mayfield, the guy who's up on your screen right there, he's led an offense that has not been explosive, an explosive play rate of only 9.8%, which ranks down at number 19, but it has not turned the ball over. Number 31, and that's good. So number 2, really. Second best as far as lowest giveaway rate. However, that being said, the Buccaneers are still mediocre. They've got some good players. They have some holdovers from the team that won the Super Bowl a couple years ago, but Tom Brady isn't one of those holdovers. And no, he's not walking back through that door like he already once did when he came out of retirement. I think that the biggest thing is that Baker Mayfield is less than Tom Brady, even less than a 45-year-old Tom Brady. That being said, why don't we take a look up and down Tampa Bay's roster, because as I did mention, they've got some players who are familiar faces who have done some good stuff in their careers. For example, Mike Evans, he's one of the more underrated receivers in football, and he has been Baker Mayfield's favorite target. Chris Godwin has also caught a nice share of passes. In fact, there's been an even distribution between Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. The really good news for the 49ers in this game is that Baker Mayfield and this Tampa Bay offense has struggled against zone coverage. And we know that the 49ers play majority zone coverage. So I don't think the 49ers have to break too far away from their usual plan on defense. The one really, really big thing about Tampa Bay is that they have not been able to run the football. They are the second worst running team in the National Football League. Rachaad White, their primary running back, is averaging only about 3.3 yards per carry. Now, I know that the 49ers, statistically, they faced a Bengals team that wasn't good at running the ball, and the Bengals were able to run the ball against them. The 49ers entering this past game against the Jacksonville Jaguars were ranked number 26 in run defense EPA per play. That had been a shocking drop-off for the 49ers over the previous 2 seasons when they were a top 2 run defense. So when the Bengals were able to run against them, we were saying, well, maybe the 49ers aren't who they used to be in run defense. Maybe Steve Wilkes has come in and changed too much. Maybe the 49ers have lost their edge. But then we saw the game against Jacksonville when the 49ers shut down Travis Etienne and company. And I think that a lot of people believe, with some evidence, that the 49ers run defense is back. On paper, they shouldn't have trouble stopping a Tampa Bay run offense that has been anemic so far this year. The main problem, I think, is blocking. I think that's a bigger problem than Rachaad White, who's the leading back for Tampa Bay. Run block win rate down at number 32. That's dead last in the league for Tampa Bay. That being said, the 49ers did play another bad offensive line last week in Jacksonville. So I don't think that this game is going to be able to prove much of anything more for the 49ers than the Jacksonville game did. The 49ers overwhelmed a bad offensive line. Obviously, the coverage had a lot to do with it for the 49ers. They made Trevor Lawrence hold on to the ball, and they obviously also overwhelmed Jacksonville's O-line in the run game. This is a similar type of challenge for the 49ers in that it's a bad run blocking offensive line and a mediocre at best pass blocking line. But I do think that Jacksonville is better at some key spots. The Tampa Bay is better at some key spots than the other Florida team that the 49ers just faced, Jacksonville. For example, Tristan Wirfs, he's moved to left tackle. He's a really nice player. Wirfs at left tackle. He was at right tackle before. Everybody laments the 49ers not drafting Tristan Wirfs. Instead, they went with Javon Kinlaw. But Wirfs has moved to the left side. He's good. But Cody Mauch, who is the right guard for this Tampa Bay team, he's a former North Dakota State Bison. He was teammates with Trey Lance at North Dakota State. He's given up 20 pressures already this season. Luke Gadecki is the new right tackle. He's been solid. But between Cody Mauch and Robert Hainsey, the center, there are a lot of struggles on the interior for this Tampa Bay team. Last week, I talked about Luke Fortner, the center for Jacksonville, having struggled, and I said this could be a really big Javon Hargrave game. Said it could be a big Eric Armstead game. The interior of the 49ers defensive line could make some hay against the bad interior of the Jacksonville offensive line. Well, I was right. It was a big Hargrave game. It was a big Armstead game. It was a big Kinlaw game. Hell, the 49ers even lined up Chase Young and Nick Bosa against the inside. If you want to see that one more time, why don't we look at it one more time? Because that was a hell of an alignment that I think the 49ers would love to show a little bit more. There's Young, there's Bosa, 92 and 97, right over the center, Luke Fortner. I think the 49ers might want to do something like that again here against the Tampa Bay team that has a struggling Robert Hainsey at center and then Cody Mauch, Trey Lance's former college teammate at North Dakota State, the rookie at right guard. But to do that, you have to stop the run, right? Before you put defensive ends up at defensive tackle, you have to stop the run. The run cannot be a threat. And that's where this Tampa Bay running struggle comes into play. They haven't been good on the ground, and I think that gives the 49ers a big advantage. Because of that, the 49ers, they simply need to hold serve on Sunday to win. I don't think that this Tampa Bay offense should threaten the 49ers defense all too much. Of the 49ers just play as themselves. Don't show up with the team that got torched on the ground against Cleveland, against Minnesota, and then against Cincinnati. Play as the team that can stop the run and have some fun. That's what the 49ers absolutely need to do. Other side of the football is probably the more intriguing matchup. So I waited until the room built up a little bit to focus on this side of the ball. But remember last year's Tampa Bay-Seattle combination for Brock Purdy. Purdy obviously entered against Miami, and that was the game where he took over for Jimmy Garoppolo, who broke his foot. Purdy threw 38 times, played really well against Miami, especially considering the fact that it was his first extended career action. Then his first start was against Tampa Bay's defense, which was a top 5 defense last year. And Purdy lit the Buccaneers up too. Beat Tom Brady in his first start, 35-7. Following that, Purdy went on the road to Seattle on Thursday night, short week, and he beat the Seahawks to clinch the division. At the time, we did not know that Purdy had broken his rib against Tampa Bay, diving out of bounds on an early scramble. Purdy didn't know during the game either because the adrenaline was flowing. But anyway, it happened, and he turned around and beat Seattle anyway with the broken rib on the road to seal the division. Well, it's deja vu all over again. The 49ers, they hope that the broken rib part is not part of it, but they play Tampa Bay at home, and then they travel to Seattle for a big division game on Thursday night, Thanksgiving night on the road. I think it's really timely that it comes now because Purdy officially has 17 career starts under his belt. That is the length of an entire NFL season. Over that time span, over those 17 games, Purdy has over 4,100 passing yards, 31 touchdowns, and only 8 interceptions. His rating is about 110, which is the best in the NFL. So statistically, Brock Purdy, who started his career, at least as a starter, against Tom Brady A year later, a full season later, 17 games later, returns to play the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Brady is no longer around, but Purdy is now statistically the number one quarterback in football. I will say that this time around, the Tampa Bay defense is no longer as good as it was last year. They've aged out a little bit. They've lost some players, but they also still do have some players. And what you really need to look out for is that the Bucs have the second highest blitz rate in the National Football League. Highest is Minnesota, 30%. Second highest is Tampa Bay, 24.6%. Third highest, the New York Giants, 24.3%. Number 4, the Dallas Cowboys, right around 23% or so. And number 5, the Pittsburgh Steelers have a really high blitz rate as well. You should notice something in common between these 5 teams that lead the NFL in blitz rate. They're all on the 49ers schedule, and the 49ers have already played 4 of them. Brock Purdy has done a good job. The offense has been productive against all 4 of the blitz-happy teams they've already faced. So now you bring on Tampa Bay and Todd Bowles, who blitzes a lot. Time to go for the 49ers. It didn't start well for Brock Purdy last year against Tampa Bay and Todd Bowles, who schemed up a blitz that blew Brock Purdy up, a nickel blitz on the very first play. Remember when Brock Purdy got destroyed right out of the gate against Tampa Bay, and everybody said, oh boy, this is going to be rough. Trial by fire, baptism by fire for Brock Purdy. A team has had a week to prepare for him now. He's not ready for these NFL blitzes. Then he turned around and dropped 35 points on Tampa Bay. So I think from that moment on, Brock Purdy was no longer surprised by any blitzes. He lit up the New York Giants blitz earlier this year. I think he did really well against Minnesota's number 1 number 1 used blitz in the NFL. Minnesota blitzed the hell out of him, and Purdy beat them time and time and time again. 49ers lost that game because of a couple reasons. First, Christian McCaffrey fumbled, right? Second, the defense was absolutely horrific. Third, Brock Purdy was concussed before he threw the 2 interceptions there at the end of the game. And those interceptions didn't even come against the blitz. That's when Minnesota dropped back in coverage because the 49ers were in desperation time. So if I'm the 49ers, I say bring on the blitz to Tampa Bay. Purdy already lit it up last year, and he has great documented experience and a great documented track record against all of the blitz-happy teams that the 49ers have faced this year. It just simply happens that the 49ers have faced or will face, when you include Tampa Bay, the 5 most blitz-happy teams in football. So Purdy's been through that trial. We saw the danger of a blitz yesterday when Buffalo inexplicably sent one 2 times in a row. And I guess Sean McDermott couldn't fire himself, so he had to fire his offensive coordinator instead. But 2-0 blitzes in a row against somebody like Russell Wilson, especially after the first one worked, was not smart football. And then Wilson beat the second one downfield, drew the defensive pass interference penalty. So Purdy's beaten a lot of blitzes. The key is to study. You need to know the answers to the test before the test arrives, because you're not going to have a lot of time. You're sometimes only going to have a second or 2 to decide where to go to the football when you're getting heated up with more rushers than your blockers can handle. But because they're bringing more rushers than you can handle, a decent play design should have a receiver open somewhere. The key is to know where that open receiver is going to be before the snap, because if they're blitzing, you're not necessarily going to have time to scan the field and find where that opening is. So the key for the offense is to study hard, to be ready for this Tampa Bay team, and then be ready to turn the page to Seattle on Thursday night. But just remember last year's combo for Brock Purdy, because I think everything symbolically does come full circle for him. Those of you joining right now, make sure to check out my scouting report. Tampa Bay in the context of their matchup with the 49ers. There it is. There's a picture of Baker Mayfield, who is less than Tom Brady, and he has the worst, second worst rushing attack in football, meaning the 49ers simply have to hold serve. That being said, the Tampa Bay run defense, it is something to consider. The 49ers were able to run against Jacksonville, which had a higher rated run defense in the top 5 last week. So obviously getting Trent Williams back was huge. Getting John Feliciano to fill in so well for Aaron Banks at left guard was big. Thought the 49ers might have gotten the best games of the season from center Spencer Burford and right guard from center Jake Brendel and right guard Spencer Burford. Colton McKivitz didn't play well, but he might have been hurt. We'll see if he plays on Sunday. He's currently day-to-day. The test against Tampa Bay starts in the middle. Vita Vea is a complete monster. I think the 49ers didn't have to face Vita Vea last year because he got hurt early in the season. I mean, but this guy, he is a people mover. He's a fire hydrant, but he's explosive at the same time. He's so good that Greg Gaines, who was a force for the Rams inside, is a second stringer on this team. Now, Gaines is going to play because this defensive line is built on depth. William Golston, who's been around for a while, he's going to play. He's a tall interior defensive lineman. I mean, this defensive line is no joke, and there's a reason why they've been at the top of the league rankings in terms of run defense for several straight years. And even though there's been a bit of a drop-off, number 7 this year for Tampa Bay. They still have Shaq Barrett, who lit up the Super Bowl against the Kansas City Chiefs at the end of the 2020 season, so you've got to look out for him. And they've got 2 really good linebackers in Levante David and Devin White on the second level. So the front 7 of this 3-4 defense is equipped to stop the run. And the 49ers are going to have to put on their big boy pants to play these guys. They did last year. I think they're fully capable of it. But that 49ers interior line and that evolving 49ers offensive line, which I think is evolving in the right direction, Vita Vea is going to be a handful. Then Shaq Barrett, we'll see what the 49ers do at that right tackle position. We'll see if it's Jalen Moore. We'll see if it's Matt Pryor. We'll see if it's Colton McKivitz, who obviously was injured last week, got rolled up on ankle and knee issues now. But Shaq Barrett is somebody who can definitely wreck a game. That said, I do think that Tampa Bay can be beaten in coverage. We'll see if Carlton Davis, the third, plays. He's a cornerback who did not play this past week, but he's been beaten several times from one of the starting cornerback spots. And then Jamel Dean is the corner on the other side. He also hasn't been airtight in coverage. So for Tampa Bay, it's the number 7 run defense, but the number 14 pass defense. So they might be the number 11 combined defense DVOA, but they've been more vulnerable through the air than they have been on the ground. And I think that the 49ers have several different spots in coverage that they can try to exploit in this football game, especially if Tampa Bay continues blitzing at as high of a rate as they have been blitzing. So full scouting report is right up here. Go ahead and check it out. I tweeted that out. You could follow me on Twitter at Lombardi himself. And some initial questions about this Tampa Bay team. I am happy to answer them. Tommy says the 49ers need to stay humble and hopefully they've learned from their past mistakes. Well, some of the 49ers' past mistakes were not mistakes. They were injuries. They didn't have Trent Williams healthy, Deebo Samuel, Christian McCaffrey. All those guys were dealing with stuff. No coincidence the 49ers get back into full gear with everybody healthy and available. Obviously, it is Nick Bosa against Baker Mayfield, the Ohio State revenge again, maybe a second vengeance game. Back in 2019, after Mayfield had planted the Oklahoma flag on the midfield logo of the Buckeyes in college against Nick Bosa, it was Bosa who planted the imaginary flag in vengeance. It was Mayfield playing for the Browns at that point. 49ers blew out Cleveland, and Nick Bosa was more than happy to taunt Baker Mayfield in response. Now the 49ers also have Chase Young, so the Buckeye bookend can try to get back at Baker again. Is everybody healthy coming into this week's game? Yes, except for Colton McKivitz. Is Banks back on Sunday? Aaron Banks? I don't know. We'll get an update from Kyle Shanahan on Wednesday. Mike says, post your questions. BMX Training says, stopping the run is the theme for the 49ers in their dominating wins. It absolutely is. Jim Everett thinks that Mike is the GOAT. Jim Everett's the resident Rams fan. He's happy with Mike. That's good. Mike has the Rams fans' approval. The Bucs are not a good running team. They might be the worst running team in the league. Rashad White has averaged only 3.3 yards per carry. he is the top running back for this Tampa Bay team. No word on Womack availability at this point. The 49ers obviously have Samuel Womack III, Robert Beal Jr., and Darrell Luter Jr. I joke those are the three players named after their dads. All three of those guys are still on injured lists. I don't say IR because Luter is on PUP, physically unable to perform, but they're back at practice and they're healthy. They just haven't been activated from those injury lists yet. The window to do so is 3 weeks. So the 49ers have 2 more weeks to activate those players. The issue right now is that, and it's not an issue, it's a good problem to have. People aren't getting hurt for the 49ers, so there's no 53-man roster room to do so. I think that they're expecting the Aaron Banks injury to last a couple of weeks, but we're not sure yet. We're going to get the firmer prognosis on Banks tomorrow at practice. Can the 49ers defense hold Tampa Bay to under 250 yards of offense? I think so. I think Tampa Bay is not explosive. I think the offensive line is sketchy, especially outside of Tristan Wirfs at left tackle. 49ers have a lot more talent. One thing with Tampa Bay is they've held on to the football. They haven't coughed it up. Second lowest turnover rate in the league. So a way to not expose yourself too much defensively is to get those takeaways. If the Buccaneers hold on to the football, they'll probably get some yardage just through virtue of possession. But I do think the 49ers can have a very, very good defensive performance if they show up to play on Sunday. I don't think the 49ers would activate Beal without an injury because, right now you're happy with your defensive line, right? So there's no reason to push things until you get to the end of the activation window. And then you have to take a long, hard look at your roster and you have to say, can Robert Beal potentially help us this year? And if the answer is yes, then you say, okay, who can we move to IR? What can we do? How can this all shuffle around so we can fit Robert Beal on the roster? But the 49ers won't be pressed into a decision until the deadline on that count. Will BA have a huge game against the Bucs weak secondary? Well, it all depends on the blitzes and what the 49ers hot reads and blitz beaters are. But I think the key is the Tampa Bay blitzes at the second highest rate in the NFL. Brock Purdy's been awesome against the blitz. The 49ers have handled it well. It just depends on how you scheme to beat some of the blitzes. You pre-scheme to beat a blitz. If they're bringing heavy pressure from the strong side, well, you're going to try to hit the strong side with your pass route, right? Is Brandon Ayuk going to be on that side? Is he going to be lined up against Carlton Davis? How's that all going? Is Davis going to play? We don't know the answers to the test. The 49ers are scheming the answers to the test as we speak. Jim Everett's trying to start crap in the comment section. He says the 1999 Rams are better than the 94 Niners. He thinks the greatest show on turf Rams are better than the star-studded Niners. And I have to tell Jim Everett that he's not correct here. The 99 Rams were a salary cap era team. The 94 49ers were the last of the great pre-salary cap era teams. Salary cap was already technically in existence, but this was right before the 49ers had to start tightening their belts, so to speak. The 99 Rams didn't have Deion Sanders on defense. The 49ers had so many future Hall of Famers, current All-Pros, Pro Bowlers. We'll never see a game as star-studded as the 1994 season's NFC Championship game between the 49ers and the Cowboys. I don't think that we saw a game with as much talent on both sides of the football again until the 2013 NFC Championship game between the 49ers and Seattle. So while Kurt Warner was a great story, similar to Brock Purdy starting his career, a little bit older though, because Warner was bagging groceries before he came over into the NFL. But, although that was a great story and the Rams are a great offense, and they had a ton of talent on the offensive side of the ball, Marshall Faulk, Isaac Bruce, I get it. Defensively, they were not anywhere near the 49ers league in 1994. Well, Tampa might blitz like crazy, but I don't think, Todd is saying that I don't, it might be a little counterintuitive, but that doesn't have that much to do with the 49ers offensive line. In fact, that might do the 49ers offensive line some favors. Where an offensive line can really be exposed is when you could beat them by rushing four because you keep more in coverage. When you're blitzing, somebody's probably going to be free regardless, right? But you use the fact that that defender is blitzing to capitalize and expose the area of coverage that he's vacated on the other end. So I don't see blitzes as being as much of a test of the offensive line as they are a test of the quarterback and the offensive scheme. Jose thinks the 49ers will win the rest of their remaining games this season and get the number one seed. That might be a tall task, but these next four, including a trip to Philadelphia, are really big, especially since Philly has a really tough schedule over these few games. Christopher Lockwood says the 94 Niners were loaded. They created the salary cap because of the 94 Niners. Ricky Jackson, Dion, Bryant Young, Stubblefield, Tim McDonald, Gary Plummer, Ken Norton Jr. He says, please, to Jim Everett. And then he says, GOAT. Love it. This probably is true. Jerry Rice could have made the Hall of Fame just from his stats against the Rams and Falcons from the old NFC West days. That's how good Jerry Rice was. I mean, Jerry Rice's stats after the age of 30 would have made the Hall of Fame. That's how good he was. He had an entire Hall of Fame career after he turned 30, which is past the age that most guys have to retire or are effective in the NFL. I mean, he truly was one of a kind. And this is the context to keep in mind. It is a quick turnaround versus Seattle on Thanksgiving. So the 49ers do want to get out of this Tampa Bay game healthy. Remember last year they lost Deebo Samuel against the Bucs. Didn't have him for Seattle on Thursday night. I don't know why people are so interested in Jack Jones. He got picked up by the Raiders, but there seems to be this obsession over a mediocre cornerback. Here, let me tell you something. Bill Belichick is in no position to be giving up and cutting good players. And Jack Jones hadn't been good this year. So, we can stop talking about it now because he's on the Raiders. But for some reason, people were going crazy about Jack Jones. Imagine Jerry Rice's stats if he didn't drop a lot of passes his rookie year. I don't know if I agree with that because maybe the fact that he dropped a lot of passes his rookie year was why he was motivated to become great over the rest of his career. Sometimes the bad stuff that happens to us ends up being the fuel for the great things that we accomplish in the future. So, it was all part of Jerry Rice's story. And he was a champion. He was somebody that handled the adversity really well. Seattle does have a quick turnaround too, but Thursday games are screwy. I look at Thursday games a lot like weather games. They're great. The short rest is a great neutralizer, a great equalizer. And the 49ers are obviously a lot better than Seattle. Their point differential is plus 109. Seattle's is -1. 49ers have been 110 points better than Seattle so far this year. But they have the same record because the Seahawks have gotten lucky at a couple of junctures. The 49ers obviously haven't. That being said, the 49ers will be favorites on Thursday night, barring, a huge rash of injuries on Sunday against Tampa Bay. You can knock on wood right there. Nobody likes injuries. But anyway, the fact that it is short rest means it's kind of like rain. Weirder stuff happens on short rest because teams won't necessarily play exactly according to their expectation. This is a really good point. Imagine Jerry's numbers with modern gear, gloves, just against modern defenses. I mean, you used to be allowed to decapitate people coming over the middle of the field. Can't do that in the NFL anymore. You'll get kicked out of the game, kicked out of the league if you do it too many times. So it's a much, much different game for receivers. The fact that Jerry Rice did what he did statistically in any era is impressive, but the era that he did it in, when there was still a lot of contact that we don't see in the game anymore over the middle of the field, it truly is astonishing. I think he's the greatest football player who has ever lived. Christopher says, Young to Rice was unstoppable. Waters, bar none, William Floyd, Brent Jones, John Taylor. He's our fourth receiver was a 1,000-yard receiver for the Broncos, Christian's dad, Ed McCaffrey. We'll have to send that to Ed. Our fourth receiver was a 1,000-yard receiver for Denver. He scored a touchdown in a Super Bowl. Well, Ed was still young, too, when he was with the 49ers. And then Shanahan took him to Denver in 1995. Mike Shanahan, not Kyle. Kyle was still a ball boy at the time. But Ed was with the 94 Niners, and there's a great picture of him with the 94 Niners. Ended up being the same uniform combination that Christian wore in his first game with the 49ers after being traded, because they put on the 94 throwbacks against Kansas City last year. The red tops and the white pants were actually throwbacks to a 1950s era uniform from the 49ers. No, the 49ers were not losing from that 1994 NFC title game against the Cowboys. Carmen Policy said at the time, if we lose to Dallas, we die. And they didn't lose to Dallas because they had lost to Dallas in 92 and 93. They couldn't afford for it to happen again. All right, everybody. This is the scouting report. First initial look at Tampa Bay. Hope you enjoyed. The key for the 49ers in this game, I think it's just to hold serve. If they hold serve on Sunday, they're going to be all right. They've done fine against the really high blitz rate before. They do have to remember, though, that Tampa Bay is the top red zone defense in the NFL. The Bucs have forced a ton of takeaways, and they have the second lowest turnover rate in football on the offensive side of the ball. So they are a team that is mediocre but can keep it close. I would say that they can be beaten in coverage, and the fact they don't have a run game has translated into no explosive passing game, and it's put the 49ers into a position of heavy favorites in this game. They're favored by 11 points against Tampa Bay. So hold serve. You're going to get the win, but the 49ers need to stay focused throughout the course of this week. Thanks for watching. We will talk to you very soon.